Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I have a topic that I personally love. I hope you do too. Most magicians, maybe not most, I don't know if most, me personally. I've had a fascination with the golden age of magic since I began in magic when I was 8 years old. Remember, I was highly influenced by Blackstone Sr. I never saw him perform. But my father told me stories about him. My father saw him perform, and my grandfather was a huge fan of Blackstone Sr. and Thurston as well. These are two primary magicians of the Golden Age. So their influence is felt today. And if you buy magic books or you're practicing magic today, I guarantee you are influenced by the Golden Age magicians. Most of the major illusions that we still enjoy today, the thin model sawing, for example, was invented in the Golden Age. The look of the magician with the goatee, that was Alexander Herrmann. So much has impacted the culture of magic from the Golden Age. And I just grew up with a sense of wonder for this time period. So I thought I would do a little bit of a presentation on the Golden Age. Before I get into that, let me do a little bit of housekeeping. And I don't usually do this. I just want to focus on the topic. But I've noticed an anomaly in YouTube, and I just want to call your attention to it. Some people will put a comment down below, and you know I love your comments, and I respond to your comments. They'll put a comment down below, and I'll get an email that tells me I have a comment. When I go to look at the comment, it's no longer there. Sometimes I get in touch with the people who made the comment and they tell me they didn't remove it. So it's an anomaly. I don't know why it's happening. If it happened to you, I apologize. I almost always respond to comments down below. So if you didn't get a comment from me, go back and take a look. Perhaps something happened. Anyway, I'm not removing those comments. I don't know if YouTube is or not, but that's an anomaly I wanted to call your attention to. Now back to the Golden Age. Let's focus on the Golden Age. Vaudeville was the beginning of popular entertainment as big business. And vaudeville evolved from the saloons, where it was basically adult entertainment, to the stage, where it was family entertainment. And it evolved during the Golden Age. I want to set this up for you in terms of historical significance. The Industrial Revolution, I believe, is responsible for setting up the conditions that made the Golden Age of magic and vaudeville possible. There was an increase because of the Industrial Revolution. People immigrated, if you will, from the rural areas to the urban areas looking for work. They knew there was more opportunity. Some of them left the farm, so to speak, came into the big city, got jobs in the factories. They were assembly line workers. They were making good wages. They became managers. They were making better wages. You had an increase in the middle class, if you will. You had an increase in wealth, both blue collar and white collar. You had an increase in leisure time. Now, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, work conditions were horrendous. Children were working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. But then you had Congress passing labor laws, put restrictions on that. Wages went up, prosperity went up. You know what happened with the automobile. Henry Ford began to manufacture an automobile that was affordable to the middle class. Everyone started driving. There were places to go. There were things to do. There was fun to be had. There was more leisure time. All because of the Industrial Revolution. And along with that leisure time, there was a desire for family entertainment. No longer did the husband go into the saloon and look for burlesque. Now, he wanted to take his family out for a nice evening of entertainment. So there was the need to create an entertainment source. Then you had improved transportation. You had the railways. You had the roadways. Major infrastructure changes were taking place. You had railways that ran from coast to coast. You had roads that ran from coast to coast. So you could transport a big show. And a lot of the early magicians, a lot of the Golden Age magicians, transported their shows on railways. Alexander Herrmann famously had his own car. It reminds me so much of the Wild Wild West, James West and Artemis Gordon tracking over the United States in their own private car. Well, that was Alexander Herrmann and his wife Adelaide. They shared the car together. So you had improved transportation. In addition, you had improved communications. You had technologies, including the telephone, making it easy to spread the word, to create publicity. Of course, back in the Golden Age, they used those beautiful posters. They would come in, the advanced man would come into town, and he would line the place with these posters, which are now highly collectible. Tens of thousands of dollars are being paid for these posters. But some of the most beautiful art ever represented in these posters, trying to create interest in the magic show. And so these were the sociological conditions that made the Golden Age possible. But then who were the Golden Age performers? I think the first, and I could be wrong about this, I mean, there were plenty of people. There were plenty of people during the Civil War. There were plenty of people just before the Civil War and just after the Civil War that were internationally famous as performers. But when I look at the Golden Age, and the Golden Age to me is the big touring show. It's the 3-hour, the 2-hour, the 3-hour show that included some variety, but it was headlined by a magician. That was the Golden Age. These shows came to town, and you knew this was an event. And it was a magic show, first and foremost. They might have had jugglers. They might have had contortionists. They might have had plate spinners. But at the end of the day, it was an illusion show, and it was a full evening. And they came into town on the railway, or they came into town in trucks or horse-drawn carriages, and they set it up, and they performed maybe for a week, and then they moved to the next town. That, to me, was the Golden Age. And I think that the father of the Golden Age was Alexander Herrmann. And this guy, he was the one with the goatee. He was the one that looked like the devil, for crying out loud. But he was really the first. And then you had names like Maskelyne and Devant at the Egyptian Hall in London. The Egyptian Hall produced, because it was, now there's two ways to do a magic show. One is to do the same show over and over again, but change your audience. The other is to constantly change your show and have the same audience. If you have a theater in town, you have some obligation to be constantly changing your show up. And so Maskelyne and Devant, by reason of the fact that, by it was Cook before it was Devant. I think Devant came along much later, but I put him in that class because he was the leading magician in London during the Golden Age, and so was Maskelyne. And they worked together in Egyptian Hall before they went to St. George's Hall. All part of the Golden Age, but I think Egyptian Hall is special because it was at Egyptian Hall that the levitation of Princess Karnak was invented, and so many others. The trunk that Houdini adapted and became his substitution trunk was invented by Maskelyne at the Egyptian Hall. So many of the legends of magic, in terms of the effects and the illusions that we think of, were invented by Maskelyne and Devant at Egyptian Hall. They were, magicians came from all over the world to sit in Egyptian Hall and possibly steal the material that they saw there. I mean, this has been part of magic forever. You know, we talk about people stealing routines today. It was done willy-nilly in the Golden Age. Carter, for example, he saw something he wanted to know. And most of these magicians, in fairness, most of them would see something at Egyptian Hall, and they would adapt it. They would change it. They would modify it. They would bring something to it that made it better. And that's really good for magic. It was really good for magic because you had a germ of an idea at Egyptian Hall, and that idea evolved into something much better. Let me take a look at our levitations, for example, or the sawing in half, which was invented by P.T. Selbit. All of these illusions came out of the Golden Age, but they didn't stay there. They evolved and they became better. So you had Maskelyne and Devant, you had Howardthurston here in America. Now, before you had Howardthurston, you had Harry Kellar. Harry Kellar was arguably, once Alexander Herrmann passed, The wand sort of passed to Harry Kellar. He was the premier magician in the United States. And then, famously in Baltimore, he retired and passed his wand on to Howardthurston. Howardthurston had possibly the largest illusion show in history. Now, a study of Howardthurston is a study in both the rise and the fall of the Golden Age. Howardthurston was performing during the fall of the Golden Age. And so what happened to him, he went from doing a 3-hour magic show to performing between movies in the cinema. So, and that is the story of the rise and fall of the Golden Age. The great magicians had to come out of the theater and into the cinema to perform between screenings. And so their show went from 3 hours to maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes between showings. So Howardthurston. Then you had Harry Houdini, part of the Golden Age. Harry Houdini and the legend of Houdini. People don't think about Carter the Great or Nicola that much in terms of the Golden Age, but these were Golden Age performers. What makes them distinctive, they weren't doing the big show touring in the United States, they were touring the world. They took their show around the world. Carter famously missed a trip on the Titanic by this much. I think, if I'm remembering this story correctly, I think it was his lion. They wanted to transport a lion. They weren't able to do it on the Titanic, so he had to take another ship where he could take his animals. And of course, the Titanic sank. And now Carter would have lost his entire act, if not his life as well. So he famously missed the Titanic. Then you had Dante. Dante came out of working for Howardthurston. He also toured the world. And then, of course, Harry Blackstone. Harry Blackstone Sr. Again, one of the great Golden Age performers that had to adapt and change as the cinema took hold. All right, so what are the forces that caused the decline of the Golden Age? Number one, radio. Radio. The first national broadcast was the 1920 United States elections held on November 2nd, 1920. Senator Warren G. Harding from Ohio defeated Democrat Governor James Cox. The first nationally broadcast radio show. After 1920, radios were in every household, and people gathered around the radio to listen to radio programs. Some will argue today that radio programs are actually better than television because of the way it stimulates the imagination. People like Dunninger, people like David Berglas were famous for capitalizing on the imagination of radio to present magic and mentalism on the radio. So magicians have been able to adapt to various technologies over the years. We're seeing in our own time magicians moving from live entertainment to vlog or to Zoom performances and for virtual performances for safety reasons. So we're seeing this technological adaptation taking place in our own time. But the major problem for the Golden Age didn't come from radio. It came from the cinema. And this is so ironic because magicians were the first to bring animated pictures to the general public. George Méliès, David Devant, all of these people started using the magic lantern. Later, the motion picture projector as part of their magic show. Remember, the technology was brand new. So when audiences saw moving pictures, it was a source of wonder and awe, just the fact that they were looking at moving pictures. And so magicians capitalized upon it. But the growth of the cinema is what caused the death of the Golden Age. The first feature-length sound cinema film was The Jazz Singer, 1927. Once The Jazz Singer hit, 1927, it was a steady decline from there. Think about it. Let's say that you're a theater manager. You can rent or pay for a copy of a film that you can show over and over again, and you've got a constant flow of new movies coming in, or you can pay the big overhead of a performer. Now, a lot of performers worked in tandem with the theater owners. They took a cut of the box office, so the theater owners weren't going to suffer loss anyway. But it was just too easy to make money in the cinema. And so it wasn't an immediate death. What took place here was magicians had to stop because the theaters were converted to cinemas. So they started doing shows between showings of feature films. Now later in the 1950s, you had the rise of the ghost show or the spook show, which is a cinema would show a late night horror film, a B horror film, and a magician would come in and do the opening or do the closing for the B horror film. And so magicians adapted even to that, but it was the jazz singer in 1927 that really sounded the death toll to the golden age. And then finally, the other element that really caused the golden age to collapse was the stock market crash, October 1929. When the stock market, everybody was enjoying so much prosperity through the 1920s, known as the Roaring Twenties. And then in October of 1929, you had the stock market crash. You had so many people losing their fortunes, losing all their money. They didn't have the money any longer to enjoy the leisure time, to enjoy entertainment. And so those were the factors that really contributed to the decline of the golden age. Folks, listen, I intend to visit this topic more because this was just an introduction. How did the golden age evolve? How did it develop? Who were the golden age performers? What did they do? What did they contribute to us today? What caused the decline of the golden age? That was kind of my overview topic today. I'm going to come back and visit this later. Hey folks, please subscribe if you've not done so already. Please comment down below. You know I love your comments. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.